Hi everyone, my name is Hope Kuchan, and my project is called Oral History, TEK, and Trust, Multiple Ways of Knowing in the Climate Crisis. So getting into background, climate change has really severe impacts on fish species important to commercial fisheries and to species that are important to indigenous peoples' subsistence and ways of life. And in the climate change conversation in general, there's often this prioritization of Western quantitative science. And though this is really important, it is definitely not the only way of knowing, and other ways of knowing often go overlooked. So, oral history, which is people verbally recounting their stories and experiences, and traditional ecological knowledge, which is indigenous people's knowledge of the environment, bring important insights and knowledge from a human perspective into the conversation. So, my research question was, what are the benefits of incorporating oral history and TEK into climate change response? So for my internship, I interned with the NOAA Alaska Fisheries Science Center and reviewed oral history interviews. In Figure 1, we see the NOAA Voices Archive where these interviews were housed. And I also researched the role of oral history and other qualitative data in ecological research. I also conducted a literature review focused on TEK and the best practice for implementation into climate change responses. Finally, I also conducted some interviews with UW academics and federal employees about the role of oral history and/or TEK in their work. So getting into results, one of my first important findings was how these forms of knowing can humanize climate change issues. A lot of the time, just hearing scientific information, again, while it's important, doesn't have the same personal connection as hearing an actual story from someone who is affected. So these ways of knowing are really important for creating that personal connection to these issues. A second important finding is the value of human observations. And in Figure 2, I created a little figure of some of the main themes I found from listening to the oral history interviews. Um, and these are really important from hearing from people familiar with the local environment for things such as sea level rise, fish patterns, and fish health, and also more social and economic issues such as trawlers and overfishing, economic instability, and community, which are really important for things like social impact assessments, and these are also really important for complementing quantitative data. My next point is empowerment, about how telling stories can help empower narrators and also interviewees for certain forms to find agency following disasters and or injustice, whether that's natural disasters, climate disasters, and injustices such as those from the federal government. And finally, building relationships and trust. So oral history outreach programs can be an important way. One example was strengthening the relationship between fishing communities and regulatory bodies such as NOAA. And another point is how these narrative or story-based methods can also be a more culturally important way of doing research work with indigenous communities. And getting into broader significance, it is really important that TEK is respected and meaningfully included in things such as academia, institutions, and organizations. And this can include things such as changing standards that might exclude TEK. There also needs to be increased partnership efforts between TEK and Western science, including things such as knowledge co-production efforts and co-management initiatives. And it's very important that during these initiatives that Indigenous values, formats, and stewardship are respected. And in order to do all these things, there needs to be support, such as financial support, and also just support in general for these outreach programs, as well as other equitable partnerships and other initiatives. And for my acknowledgments, I'd like to say thank you to my site supervisors, Sophia Wasserman and Emily Markowitz, and my faculty advisor, Luna Alzaru. And I'd like to thank my whole Capstone cohort, my friends, my family, and I'd also like to acknowledge that I completed this project on Coast Salish lands. Thank you.